Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone was actually preparing for this class at 5 a.m. today. And, subhanAllah, when you prepare for the class at Fajr time, you get a different inspiration. So let's see right there. We left off at with Tafseer al-Qurtubi, and we were basically going, oh, okay, here we go. This is what we were doing. قالوا أئن لنا لأجرا. Where was that at? أئن لنا لأجرا إن كنا نحن الغالبين. Okay, so we're going to erase all of this. All right, and certainly we were at where when Fir'aun and basically searching for new developers of magic. Let's call it developers of magic. Okay, so it's really close to the developers of AI and all of that. So new developers of magic, and certainly they were wanting a compensation. And then we had a different qira'ah that said that they were not wanting or he wasn't offering compensation, but they were asking for a compensation. And we said the two different qira'at, whether wanting a compensation, asking for a compensation, at the end of the day, there can be that negotiation between two sides of I guess, somebody that is benefiting and somebody that is seeking service. Sometimes it can be a form of negotiation. And within this negotiation, sometimes you can negotiate on what that even place is at. So at the end of the day, we looked at some of the qira'at and we went to this beautiful website that would give us all these qira'at, and we said it was mquran.com. Really cool website, gives me all those qira'at for those that love listening to the qira'at. I'm starting, to be honest, Dr. Samia Harb introducing us to those qira'at, I'm starting to just love it and just want to enjoy listening to those qira'at. It just feels like you're getting a different like a different angle, and at the same time getting a different vibe. And I'm used to the riwayat hafs, so to hear it from a different qira'ah, it all of a sudden gives you like you're hearing it for the first time. So yeah, my specialty is not qira'at, so I would basically have to go to this really to know it. So that's not my specialty, but because we're going over al-Qurtubi, I basically have to let you see it and not me introduce it. Okay, let's see. قالوا يا موسى إما أن تلقي وإما أن نكون نحن الملقين. So then, of course, the Pharaoh, he basically gets those magicians. The magicians then stand in this parade, and certainly now each wants to introduce their own capabilities and their own abilities and how they can basically, or at least every single magician, or did they work together to actually decide on how this happens? Well, based on the ayah, you could see قالوا يا موسى إما أن تلقي وإما أن نكون نحن الملقين, which basically means they said, oh Musa, you either throw out your performance, that is, or we would be the ones to throw in first. So you can see that it's an organized performance, and they considered Prophet Musa alayhi salam as making a performance. And I want you to see right there, you're talking about إما أن تلقي, you can see that he was on his own, and they recognize that he was on his own as one person. And أن نكون نحن الملقين, and you could see another group that was basically working as a team to present their own magic. All right. So they, this also just in itself, by the way, if you're talking about like the whole team in front of one person, that in itself actually sends an inference that you're bringing a whole team to challenge just one person. That in itself sends out a message that you're already failing, and that this person is already going way past you if you're just doing all this work just to challenge one person. And the challenge wouldn't be real unless there was some competence, at least equivalent to one another. All right. But certainly, the Pharaoh wasn't going to bring all this team if Prophet Musa alayhi salam had not already proven to him that he had a potential that was far greater than what he can actually present. So he needed to do all of that. And certainly the magicians themselves, they for sure had heard some information about the potential that he was going to be presenting, and which basically required of them to bring about the greatest of what they can do. In fact, the Quran describes it, وَجَاءُوا بِسِحْرٍ عَظِيمٍ, that they had come forth with great magic. When you say great magic, this is not at all to endorse it, but this is to actually expose the effort that they had invested in making this possible. That's basically what it is supposed to be basically describing with the word azim. Definitely, it does not endorse magic, but it's actually to express it, that it was done with perfect and very intricate efforts to make sure that they were going to match what Prophet Musa alayhi salam was going to present, and in order to get to certainly to get to their goal, which is defeat Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Okay, but here's one thing that's quite interesting that al-Qurtubi wanted to note. He said that by saying you either throw your performance first or we do it first, that he said, al-Qurtubi, he had seen that there's an inference in there, and he called it ta'addabu. He said that they had the mannerisms to basically come forth to Prophet Musa alayhi salam and ask him to come first. It's quite interesting that he said that they had ta'addabu, because that's not necessarily what all scholars would see. Other scholars, they don't see it as an adab, but they see it as more of wanting to challenge him. When that's why some scholars, you could see that it was more of a challenge, more of a threat. It's like, go ahead. It's kind of like somebody telling the other person, go ahead, do it. It's not that they necessarily are I guess being humble, but they're actually then I guess threatening him, challenging him, and trying to belittle him. So it's quite interesting that that's not what al-Qurtubi had seen in this sentence, even though I see it otherwise. But of course, I'm not as the at the ilm of al-Qurtubi, so I have to adab myself, I guess. And actually just say, hey, this is what al-Qurtubi is saying. And one thing that he got out of that, he said, this adab is what led him, or led them to having iman later on. It's quite interesting if you were to look at that as an inspiration, that the adab, the mannerisms that a person would come forth, may even channel and determine how and what actually happens later on. So later on, we know that the magicians did embrace Islam. They did fall in prostration and sujood, and was the adab that they had embraced, that the adab that they had shown, one of the key reasons? Or did they have this adab because they recognized their capacity was not going to be matching necessarily, and they were wanting to see what he was presenting, because certainly they didn't see it yet? And certainly when you see somebody else's presentation that either makes you or breaks you, you either are going to be putting even more efforts to match it, or you're going to get broken because you already know that your capacity is not going to be matching whatever was presented in front of you. So was that the reason why? If we were to look at it as تأدبوا. Okay, he did say also, قالوا إما أن تلقي وإما أن نكون نحن الملقين. So قالوا إما أن تلقي. So basically telling me that there's a different قراءة right there with الكسائي and الفراء. Okay, we're going to check that out in just a bit, inshallah. قال ألقوا, and then Prophet Musa alayhi salam basically said ألقوا. So is this An imperative verb, certainly. It's an imperative verb, but some scholars like al-Farra. Let me just say one thing about al-Farra. Al-Farra is one of the key scholars in Lugha Arabiya. The key scholars in Lugha Arabiya, just a background in Lugha Arabiya, in order to consider that something is in Lugha Arabiya, you're going to key figures. You're going to, al-Farra is one of them. You're going to Zajjaj is another. You're going to Sibawayh is another. Niftawayh is another. And certainly there are other scholars, but these are probably the most important scholars. Now that's, the different scholars are one reference, but there's another reference in a key reference, which is poetry. Just like you see right there, this poem was basically laid out as a reference to show that a certain word in Lugha Arabiya is actually used. But the reference in poetry, in order for it to be regarded as reference, it must be basically dated before 205 Hijriya for that poetry to be considered as a reference. So it's not any poetry. No, it's a particular poetry that is that was said before the date of 205 Hijriya. Why 205, that specific date? Well, that's because that's when al-Shafi'i died. Al-Shafi'i was the last eloquent poet to speak in eloquent poetry. He was the last person. Al-Shafi'i, the famous Shafi'i, Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. He was the famous, basically, most eloquent person. The Prophet ﷺ died 11-year Hijriya. Al-Shafi'i died 205. Okay, so just keep that one in mind. So it's not any poetry, but it's a specific poetry that was not influenced by the different influences out there. So it was extremely classical. So anything before the date 205 Hijriya that was basically reviewed and seen as classical by that time, that's when they would consider it as classical. This doesn't mean that poets like al-Mutanabbi is not classical, or probably, I don't know, al-Ma'arri is not classical, this doesn't mean that these are not classical. Okay, but we're speaking about the reference. If we wanted to use a reference in giving me a specific meaning, a specific definition, or giving me certain information on how grammar is also used, then we would have to go back to that poetry that is dated before that date. Okay. So we cannot say, okay, well, here's, I don't know, Ahmad Shawqi, and let's look at his poem and actually see what he says and use that as a reference. You cannot use that because this person is basically a modern poet and not somebody, even if that was al-Mutanabbi, you need to go way further back than those poets in order to use them as a reference and use their poetry as a reference to prove something in whether the grammar in Lugha Arabiya or whether we're speaking about the definitions, the meanings, basically the vocabulary and so forth. Okay, so when al-Farra, what did he get out of that? Al-Farra, key scholar in Lugha Arabiya, he basically says, قَالَ أَلْقُوا, he said that there is an inference in it. So if we say that there's hadf, we're speaking about there's an inference, and what that means, he said, well, Musa alayhi salam, in the word alqu, he was capable of reading something else. He was capable of reading one thing that is in lisan al-hal and lisan al-maqal. Remember, we said in speech there are two things. In speech, there's one that is literally what the statement is saying, literally what the person is quoting, and that's lisan al-maqal, what the person is literally saying. Okay. Now, lisan al-hal is basically what the person is speaking in terms of their behavior, their appearance, the circumstance is saying of itself. Okay. So if I were to have somebody running and coming in, and fast and closing the door right away, I would know that this person's scared and that there's something wrong. If a baby or a boy is crying, I would know that they're either in pain or, something happened. Something's not right. All right. So that's how we would look at lisanul hal. And that's another way of communication. But certainly from the context, Al-Farra was capable of reading that Musa alayhi salam was within lisanul hal. He said it was basically saying in itself that you would not be capable of overcoming your Lord's powers, and you are not going to be capable of overcoming the Lord Almighty's miracles. So that's what he understood. In Al-Qurtubi, you can see when he says, وَهَذَا مُعْجِزُ الْقُرْآنِ الَّذِي لَا يَأْتِي مِثْلُهُ في كلام الناس ولا يقدرون عليه. And you could see that Al-Qurtubi is actually also approving and endorsing this inference that was basically mentioned by Al-Farra. And he said what this would really reflect is that the Qur'an's miraculous ways in its eloquence, in noting certain words, and just one word we can read within lisanul hal, within the circumstances that Prophet Musa alayhi salam certainly was telling them alqu, but we can see that it actually was standing for more than that, that he himself was speaking in confidence and saying, you know what, go ahead. You want to present your presentation, go ahead. I am very confident that there's absolutely no way that you're going to be capable of challenging your Lord Almighty's miracles. So he was speaking in confidence to actually say, go ahead and throw out your presentation. And that's why, this doesn't necessarily contradict what the other scholars had said, which is when they said that that was a word. When Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he said, قَالَ أَلْقُوا. When Prophet Musa alayhi salam said, أَلْقُوا, throw in your magic, your presentation, whatever it is, that was actually a challenge. And he was basically another inference. You will see what will be basically happening to you. In other words, you're going to get exposed. Your weaknesses, your silly magic is going to get exposed. And certainly no scholar, they should have actually put, instead of a comma here, they should have actually put a semicolon, which right there they said this is not to be understood whatsoever when Prophet Musa alayhi salam said alqu, that was an imperative verb to tell and giving them the order to do magic. And this is very important to keep in mind. A lot of times people can, if they don't know Lugha Arabiya, and we're seeing a lot of misinformation, and I'll say subsidized misinformation, and this is really important to keep in mind. We're seeing right now subsidized misinformation on Islam, and they're bringing these figures that have basically been subsidized to speak against Islam. And certainly whether we're speaking about the channel of al-Mujtama, or whether we're speaking about certain figures, Shahrur, and all these different figures that are right now speaking and presenting themselves as the experts on Islam. So you just want to be really careful that many, in fact, all the times you could see that we are getting people that present themselves as experts on Islam. And of course, they will understand and will say, well, I've got a verse in the Quran that proves that magic is something that is permissible to do. And they'll take this word out of context and say, hey, Prophet Musa alayhi salam said, alqu. The Prophet Musa alayhi salam was telling them to actually perform magic. And certainly, if you don't know Lugha Arabiya, then you might fall in this. But Prophet Musa alayhi salam, this is not imperative verb to tell them to perform it. And he definitely was not endorsing them, and definitely was not happy of what they were doing, because they wanted to present nothing but a delusion in order to attempt to challenge Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So there we go. This was more of of a challenge coming from Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and certainly he was not ordering them to do magic. And certainly he was ordering them in order to expose their lies, expose the delusion that they were basically engaging in. And certainly when they threw their magic, and in the word their magic, it was, what was it? So here they said, or the ayah, or the scholars actually said, it was al-hibal wal-usli. Where did they get al-hibal wal-usli? Which basically means ropes and rods. So when you say ropes and rods, why did they choose ropes and rods? We know that the ayah that did it was very explicit and say, in telling us and letting us know in another surah that they used hibal and usli. Was that because they did recognize that Prophet Musa alayhi salam, that cane that he was holding, that it carried some supernatural powers, so they wanted something to match it. So they would probably insert something in these ropes, in these canes, or in these rods as to challenge, as to match basically what they had heard about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, perhaps. But certainly was there an influence? How did the audience perceive this? The audience were definitely taken by their magic, which is what the ayah was emphasizing when it said saharu a'yunan nas, that they basically had indeed deluded and impressed basically the people. When it says impressed the people, impressed their eyes, in other words, they did recognize that that was magic, but it was really something that did get far in impressing the people. And certainly they did think of it as real. They did think of it as real. It was something that they had seen with their own eyes, and plus it manipulated their thinking. It was a real optical delusion, or a real optical illusion that caused the delusion, that caused a delusion. And this is very important when you're talking about an illusion. Yeah, all right, optical illusion, and you're also saying that delusion that also got them into misunderstanding and losing basically their focus. And certainly you can see that this type of magic that they were doing, which type was it? Was it using some form of a trick, or was there a spell? Maybe perhaps this is an important question, because scholars actually debated this one. Scholars debated whether there was a magic spell that was used, or whether there was more of a magic trick. What's the difference? A magic spell can actually cause some changes in your brain, some changes in the way you relate to things. In other words, have this effect on you internally. If we're speaking about a magic trick, no, it's not affecting you internally, but it has a different way of affecting you internally and how you relate to whatever you're saying, by basically hiding the reasons and what it really is happening behind what you are seeing. So they'll give an example, might actually, I don't know, bring a hat and then show you that there's nothing inside, and then all of a sudden, use the magic wand and basically show you that there's a bunny that came out. Okay, this is what I mean by magic trick. All right. And certainly, if you don't know how all of this is done, it will appear as if he basically got a bunny outside of this hat, if you don't know how it's done. So, ladies, you understand what I'm saying. Now, the scholars actually debated just on this word, that saharu a'yunan nas and ja'u bi sihrin azim. Scholars actually debated whether magic is real or whether it is not real. Okay, what does that mean? If you say it is not real, what are you referring to? And if you say magic is real, also what are you referring to? So the scholars that considered that there's no such thing as a magic spell and it is not real, they used this word to say, well, saharu ayunan nas, and said that magic cannot whatsoever, whether this was a spell or whether this was a trick, It cannot have any powers to change the person internally. Meaning that certainly it's all nothing but an imagination. It is all nothing but an illusion, and nothing can have the power to change the person on the inside. Now, this is the first opinion. The second opinion, they basically said that no, magic spells are real and that they're capable of harming the person that they are targeting, even without touching them. What do you mean harming them? Harming them, probably getting them sick. Harming them, probably changing their feelings about something. Harming them, probably getting them mentally ill, getting into delusions, getting into different I guess psychological state or physical state, or probably their situation changing and that affecting them. Now, the second opinion also used the same evidence right there, Saharu a'yun an-nas, and they also had another evidence, which is the ayah in Surah al-Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's go to that Surah al-Baqarah. I think it's ayah 121. Hold on. Let's just remember page 173. And I'm going to take you to that ayah. I believe it's ayah 121. Okay. And let's go to it. If I remember correctly, I'm going to go to 121 and see if that is actually true. Let's see. So this is, where's 121? No, I'm actually wrong. Let's see. I guess it's not in here. Hold on. Can't believe واتبعوا ما تتلو الشياطين على ملك سليمان. This is the ayah that I'm looking for. Okay, and the reason why am I not going the wrong area? Hold on. Let's just use this. Okay, واتبعوا right there. واتبعوا ما تتلو الشياطين. Okay, here we go. Gave me it right on the spot. That way I won't have to search for it, right? See right there. This ayah right there. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. So the scholars that had actually seen in this ayah that there's this evidence that proves that that magic is real or is not real, they also use this ayah and considered that, let's look into it. They said the ayah says what, and they followed what is shayateen. The word is tatlu. Tatlu means to recite. So that they said that there was a magic spell. There's another type of a magic spell, and that it was basically common in the kingdom of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was not teaching any of this, and certainly وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. It was actually shayateen, whether they were human shayateen or whether they were jinn shayateen. At the end, they were definitely teaching people how to relate to magic, and it was in the kingdom of Babylon, and every time they would teach them something, they would basically tell them that this is a fitna, do not do this, and here's that note right there. فَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ منهما ما يفرقون به بين المرء, and certainly the word وزوجه is basically gone right there, but that they would learn what would differentiate and separate between the husband and the wife. So if you were to say separate between husband and wife, you're actually talking about an ability. How do they separate between the husband and wife? Is that a magic spell that all of a sudden he just feels that he does not like her anymore, or that she doesn't like him anymore? What does that mean? So certainly maybe the biggest usage for magic at the time was maybe for romantic reasons, maybe for social reasons. And she's angry at this person, so they'll basically, hey, what's the worst thing that you can do between a person, between a couple, is really separate between them. So that was the key thing that they were using magic for. But the scholars in the first opinion that said that no, this isn't an evidence that you can use in order to say that magic is real. And they said, when it said فَيَتَعْلَمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ, they said, we're not going to submit to that interpretation. They said, we have a different way of interpreting this ayah. How do you understand it? They said, well, the way we understand it is they might actually say something. So for example, they're saying a husband and wife, they're, a happy couple, but then somebody else will come in to ruin the relationship and might actually tell the wife, hey, the other day I saw your husband with this woman. I'm not sure what he was doing. I just want to be honest, and come in a way to appear like a person of integrity. But what was intended, he wasn't with anybody, or probably maybe he was with a woman, but maybe he's a businessman and he was just, hey, we're handing in money. But this person, this third person, just wanted to make this wife skeptical. Is he cheating on me? What's happening? Who's this woman? And then get into this debate. And then she's basically heated, and he's basically also heated in this conversation because, hey, I'm accused. He's trying to prove it. She's also trying to prove it. And she's trusting this third person. And they basically said that this is يفرقون به بين المرء وزوجه, that إن من البيان لسحرا. This is basically referring to certain words that were used wrong, and certainly the intention was not a good intention. Their intention was to bring about that separation between the couple, and certainly they managed to do it. So that was their interpretation. Now, going back to that ayah that we were doing, I think we were on page 173. Let's go back to it again. Trying to understand, well, is this necessarily saying that magic is real or magic is not real? They also use the other evidence, يُخَيَّلُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ سِحْرِهِمْ أَنَّهَا تَسْعَى. They said, well, the other ayah basically said يُخَيَّل, that it was nothing but an imagination, nothing but a delusion, nothing but an illusion that turned into a delusion, but it cannot happen that a person gets impacted in any form or gets influenced by any magic spell by, who knows, writing certain things, and might say that that has secret codes, and stabbing a doll that represents X or Y, and then this person getting ill or getting something as a result of this magic. All right. Now, we did say that there is an authentic hadith when the Prophet ﷺ himself actually had faced and had an experience with magic, and it is an authentic hadith. And the hadith goes as follows: that the Prophet ﷺ سحر الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم في مشط ومشاطة ووجف في طلع نخلة ذكر. Maybe I should show you that hadith. سحر الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم في مشط ومشاطة. I'm just gonna, because I don't have the ra right there. ومشاطة. Let's see if I can get the hadith. Okay, here's the hadith. And certainly we can see this hadith of Prophet ﷺ himself. I think I presented this hadith that he himself was actually under the impression that he was intimate with his wives when he really was not. And certainly then two angels would come in, one standing next to his head and the other one basically standing next to his feet. And they were holding this conversation, what's happening with this man? And they would say, well, he was under a magic spell, and the magic spell basically involved certain pieces of his hair and a male palm tree pollen that was used to make this magic, and it is thrown in Bi'r Dharwan. It was thrown in an abandoned well in Dharwan, basically the outskirts of Medina. And the person to do it, his name was Labid ibn al-Asam. So Labid ibn al-Asam, so the malaika that came to him in the shape of a human being, they told him who had done it, where it is exactly, where this magic spell was located, and then they taught him later how to break the spell. And it was reading قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ 3 times, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ 3 times, and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ 3 times. And while they are untying this magic spell, that they would basically start blowing and reading these ayat on it. Now, of course, we could see that this hadith, you could see it right there. It is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. Certainly, this is basically an authentic hadith, not made up. And certainly, this hadith, we cannot whatsoever somehow challenge its authenticity, because there's no question about its authenticity. We know it's authentic. All right. Now, the scholars that disagreed and said that magic spells are not real, they did not deny that this hadith was authentic. They just said that after this date, that was their explanation. They said after this date, magic was basically impossible and not something that was happening. So they, in other words, they did say and consider that, yes, this is probably something that was happening before, but not any longer. Why? What is their evidence? Well, their evidence, they used the ayah and said, because in Surah al-Jinn, وَأَنَّا وَجَدْنَاهَا مُلِئَتْ حَرَسًا شَدِيدًا وَشُهُبًا. In Surah al-Jinn, let's go to Surah al-Jinn and actually see what exactly they were talking about in order to certainly, see it right there. Oh, wow, this is actually right on the spot. All right, let's see. وأنه كان رجال من الإنس يعوذون برجال من الجن فزادوهم رهقا وأنهم ظنوا كما ظننتم أن لن يبعث الله أحدا. Here we go. Here's the quote. وأنا لمسنا السماء فوجدناها ملئت حرسا شديدا وشهبا وأنا كنا نقعد منها مقاعد للسمع فمن يستمع الآن يجد له شهابا رصدا. So what happened? So the story is that the jinn were basically saying that they had noticed that there was a change when the Prophet ﷺ basically had come with the revelation, and they had found that the skies were actually filled with meteorites, unlike before when they used to sit in order to sneak peek or to basically steal some information, hearing Ahl Sama speaking, hearing basically the angels speaking in the heavens. And now they're basically exposed to meteorites, exposed to just different things that are blocking their ability that they used to have before in order to use it for magic. So, and then certainly they became Muslim, and that was what the first opinion had basically explained, that there's that explanation that this is not real anymore. So whether you want to believe in magic spells, what is that? That famous book, and they made a movie about it. What is that? What is that called? Harry Potter. Harry Potter. Whether you want to believe that there's such a thing or not, of course, you can see that the ayat do give us some signs that magic spells are real. And at the same time, for those that feel that, no, I want to be a rational person and don't want to believe in magic spells, but I would like to believe that, no, this is nothing but a magic trick that they were performing, that's also a valid opinion as well. And even though I actually hold the opinion and regard that magic spells are real, I personally had seen it in my own eyes. All right. I'd seen it in my own eyes. I'd seen the effect on people in my own eyes. You would really have to see it to believe it. I did not believe in it before, but I had many cases come to me. And yes, you have to see it to believe it. There's no way that you can, I challenge you to just sit there and put in all the effort in your powers and in your body to just decide to throw up blood. And certainly I had seen this in my own eyes, people throwing up blood, people doing movements that are basically outside of human capacity to do. All right. Or even understanding and communicating with the person, even though they don't even understand Arabic, but they're able to communicate. This is not something that I can somehow bring about a footage to show you. All right. It's their own little private thing. But I had seen it, and yes, I personally believe it. I really, really believe it. And of course, if you were to look into same thing, a lot of, especially the Madhab Hanbali, like Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qudama, they would speak a lot about that and their experience. I must admit, there was a point where I was doing just research about this, and I actually wanted to be a very rational person. And I was coming across the books that Ibn Taymiyyah, specifically Ibn Taymiyyah, and coming across his stories that he was sharing in how he had seen different cases. And I even remember the volume. It was volume 28, pages 119 and 120. I still remember the page. This isn't something that I always remember, but I still remember those pages and me going over them a couple times, and Ibn Taymiyyah saying that he had seen these cases that were influenced by sihr, and that they would be speaking in different languages that this person did not ever speak in. And at the end of the day is that he was saying different cases that had come to him, and he could not explain but that this was nothing but a magic spell. At the time, I somehow did not believe it, and I thought, well, that was his experience, and did not believe it. And I thought, hey, I got to be a rational person just because it's written in those books. I got to be a rational person and a tough person. After all, I graduated, and with part of my, part of my specialty in, of course, it was taking some parts of physics and all of that, and chemistry. Yeah, I gotta present myself, that rational person. But then I realized that I was actually totally wrong. Totally wrong. Yeah, there's some things, sorry, you got to see it to believe it. And that's all I can tell you. I cannot prove it to you. And I've had doctors come to my office. I've had professors come to my office. I had different majors come to my office, and even Quran experts also come to my office, and they were under that influence. So yeah, you want to believe it, that's okay. You don't want to believe it, that's okay too. You don't have to believe it if you don't want to. It doesn't make you a kafir, but just that's a different note. I do have a whole video on magic, so you can check it out, and that's a different thing. Do I recommend doing ruqya? The answer is I do not recommend anybody to be in a specialty of ruqya. I faced certain things myself as a result of doing ruqya. So right now I don't actually do it unless, I do a lot of ruqya on that day on myself. And the most important ruqya that you would do, certainly the Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So you hold your hands like you're going to wash your face, okay? And you read Qul Huwallahu Ahad 3 times, the whole surah. Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq 3 times, basically the whole surah, and Surah An-Nas, basically the whole surah, 3 times, and then you blow 3 times, and then you wipe over your face. Yes, can you use different methods? You're not just wiping over your face, you're probably reading over water, or you're probably reading maybe over food, and people are taking this, or over honey, or probably over habbat al-barakah, or whatever it is, or probably sidr. You could do that. It's really all about experience, and we don't have authentic evidence, at least in regards to reading over honey or reading over, let's say, different substances, food, or even a big bucket of water and scooping it over the person or spitting it over the person. We don't have evidence in that way, but we do have authentic evidence that can protect you from sihr, which is the method that I had said, wiping over your face. Scholars had differed whether you can wipe all over your body or not. Another very strong thing to use on yourself to protect you and also on the person as a recommendation to protect them from the impact of magic spells, or even on you as well, which is after Fajr prayer. After Fajr prayer, to read 100 times, La ilaha illallah, wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk, wa lahul hamd, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. 100 times. Maybe I can get that one out for you. So I'm going to write it right here. So لا إله إلا الله. Let's see. Okay. وحده. I'm going to write it for you. لا شريك له. له الملك. Okay. وله الحمد. I know you can't see it fully. I'm going to get it out for you. And وهو على كل شيء قدير. This is basically it right there. Okay. Let's make it bigger, right? Okay. Here we go. Let's see if I can get that one for you. Or maybe I can get you one that has this one. Okay, there we go. Here we go. And he said, من قال في يوم 100 مرة لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد وهو على كل شيء قدير كان له عدل 10 رقاب. It would be equivalent to 10 like as it, yeah, 10 people that you are freeing from slavery. And كُنَّ لَهُ حِرْزًا مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ. That's the key one. That it would also protect you from the influence of shaitan throughout the night and throughout the day. Okay? And you could see that this hadith was narrated in Bukhari and Muslim. Okay? You're right there in Tirmidhi, and you, in other words, this hadith is actually authentic. Okay? So this right there, La ilaha illallah, you gotta memorize that like you would memorize the Fatiha. All right, so now you have it right there. And let's go back. So just to note, of course, I don't want to go in all the details. Now we see when it says وَجَاءُوا بِسِحْرٍ عَظِيمٍ, was that magic necessarily a magic trick, or was that a magic spell? If you're talking about magic spell, this is what would be basically considered as sha'wada. Sha'wada means as ugly as the name is. The word sha'wada, the name itself is ugly. Just the word, just say the word sha'wada, and you just feel like, oh my God, you're getting goosebumps. Just the word sha'wada. Okay, it's an ugly word, isn't it? Okay, what does it mean? It means a magic spell. Okay, and or is it خفة اليد? خفة اليد just means that they're doing what is that? A trick. Sukuna, go ahead, dear. You rose your hand and then you put it down. Go ahead, dear. I can see you.
It's okay. You changed the subject. I didn't want to. I didn't want to get you off track.
That's okay. Go ahead, hit it, girl. You're not always going to get the opportunity. Go ahead. If you still
Oh
remember
my
the
God,
question, go ahead.
how are you? No, I wanted to make sure I understood you correctly. You said you wouldn't recommend Rukia, but then you said, so are you saying you wouldn't recommend us doing Rukia for somebody else, but do it for ourselves? Is that what you were saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that I don't recommend you taking that as a professional position, or trying to, I guess, take it as a specialty and actually do that. And even if you wanted to do ruqya to someone else, do not do that until you protect yourself first. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure you wasn't saying like, I just want to make sure what you were saying. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
no. Even though scholars, just a note, did actually debate on the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ, remember that story? When the Prophet ﷺ actually said 70,000 will enter Jannah with no hisab. Let's get that hadith out. Okay, سبعون ألفا. Okay, يدخلون الجنة. Okay, and then we're going to get that hadith out for you. Here it is. All right, so this is the hadith right there. Let's see. The hadith is actually authentic. Here we go. Let's see. I hope I can find it right away. Okay, you tricked me, or what happened? Okay, here we go. This is the hadith. هم الذين لا يرقون ولا أو لا يسترقون ولا يتطيرون ولا يكتوون وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. There is another narration. الذين لا يسترقون. Okay, let's see if I can find it right there. 70,000 يدخلون الجنة بغير حساب. Okay, it's not giving it to me right there, but we're going to find it. Here we go. Here we go. And it didn't actually say it here. And let's see, is it going to give me where it is? Okay, so to make the story short, I can't find it really quick right now. Let's see, maybe in Kitab al-Riqaq. Okay, at least we got this one. It basically comes to the same center, that the ones that do not do ruqya. So scholars actually had differences of opinions on that hadith when the Prophet ﷺ basically said سبعون ألفا يدخلون الجنة بغير حساب الذين لا يرقون ولا يسترقون and وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. Okay. And here we go. This is the hadith right there. So this hadith is actually authentic. You can see it right there. Oh, it took me to the same spot. Oh dear. Okay, I'm going to get you that hadith. Hold on. And certainly the scholars actually had differences of opinions on how to understand this. The first one, so what is the story? That the Prophet ﷺ basically said 70,000 will enter Jannah. And then he basically said that word, and then a man stands up. His name is Ukasha ibn Mihsan. He comes up and stands up and he said, "O Prophet of Allah, pray to Allah that I would be one of them." And he said, "You're one of them." Another man stands up and he says, "Me too." And he said, "Ukasha beat you to it." Okay. And he then continued and said, there are 70,000 people that will enter Jannah without any accountability. Those are the people that do not do ruqya. Those are the people that do not engage in il-kay. Il-kay is it's basically to heat like a rod and stamp it on the skin. So in certain African tribes, they would use that as a way to identify their own people. And that's basically ilkay. That was common at that time, certainly. And وَلَا يَتَطَيَّرُونَ, and do not use any form of superstition. This form of superstition, they would, for example, see a bird flying to the left or flying to the right, and that basically they would consider that that's a superstition to give them a sign whether they're going to have a good day or a bad day. And then here the Prophet ﷺ said, وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. So they don't engage any of the superstition or harming the body or even in any ruqya. Now, scholars actually had differences of opinions on الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْتَرْقُونَ. Is this the type of ruqya that is a shirk ruqya? What is a shirk ruqya? A shirk ruqya, just like, you will have it's very common in Egypt, probably that yellow, that blue eye thing, that blue eye that they tell you that it protects you from evil eye and all of that. Or in some other areas, they might actually have the dream catcher, or in other areas, they might have basically just different things that they consider that it brings good luck, or it brings basically healing, or etc. And therefore, that would be a form of shirk, because you would believe that that item has the power to protect you, to give you basically a good life, bring provision, bring something, and then that way it would be believing in that instead of in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that situation, that would be shirk. Okay, so the first opinion, they basically said, well, we understand this hadith, it's basically forbidding us and forbidding the people to engage in shirk ruqya, and not necessarily in any ruqya, because the Prophet ﷺ himself, when he had that magic spell done on him, he definitely did that ruqya, which is what Malak, the angel, had taught him, reading al-Ikhlas, reading al-Falaq, and reading al-Nas, each surah 3 times, and then blowing that's a form of ruqya. So they said that this is basically referring to the shirki ruqya and not necessarily any ruqya. Regardless of that, at the end of the day, whether you want to do well, if you want to do a shirki ruqya, there's no question that that's haram, okay? But if you want to do a ruqya, do the ruqya on yourself first before you attempt to bring about ruqya for others. And certainly the Prophet ﷺ had asked Hafsa, or asked Safiya, to teach basically Hafsa ruqyatin namla. It was a ruqya specific ruqya, and he taught her and told her to teach her co-wife, basically Hafsa, that ruqya and how to do it. So if the Prophet ﷺ would ask one of his wives to teach the other wife basically how to do that ruqya, he would not recommend that or ask her to teach it to someone else if that was supposed to be a bad thing. Okay. And then another hadith in Sahih Muslim, لا بأس بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. As long as the ruqya is basically not containing any shirk, not containing any form of faith in believing that something has the power beyond Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or believing or doing something that is thought or that is believed, or someone would think of it, that it has the power to connect to God and God would give me this protection or whatever it is, then in that situation, that's a form of shirk as well. Okay, so that's the ruqya that would be shirky. I personally would not do ruqya anymore. I would do it maybe, sometimes, but not until I would really do it on myself first, because I've had very bad experiences myself where it basically inflicted me later on, and I had to get into ruqya myself because it was becoming something that harmed me. It moved from that person to also harming me as well. So I would just say, just be careful, make sure you do the ruqya on yourself before you do it and before you get yourself into this type of trouble. My recommendation, don't ask people to do ruqya for you. You do your own ruqya. This is the most important thing. Even if you were to go to the doctor will give you the prescription, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you're taking the medication. And that's the same thing. The raqi, their job is not to remove everything entirely. The raqi is just to give you, from their experience or from what they were taught, okay, to give you some recommendations, maybe read Quran on water, spill it on yourself, or probably drink water that has maybe Surah al-Baqarah read on it, or probably to repeat certain ayat in Surah al-Safat, or Surah maybe Fussilat, or Surah Yunus ila akhrihi, just repeat these ayat, or probably maybe do different forms of making dhikr, like in the morning, etc., to give you that protection from this type of magic spell. And that's then the person's responsibility to really stay committed to that dosage or that prescription. And certainly, if somebody comes to you and tells you that they're going to be capable of removing that magic spell without you doing a certain dosage, I'll tell you, maybe 80% of the times these people are imposters. If they were to tell you that they're going to remove it from the first time, I'll tell you that's 95% of the times that they're actually imposters. They're liars. They're just trying to get money out of you. No one can guarantee that, yes, I will remove whatever sihr or whatever was done onto you. Just give me a couple hours, or give me this, or pay me this. That is going to be a lie. It would actually require a lot more time that the person himself or herself are actually doing as a daily regimen to keep them stronger in the face of whatever is harming them, in order to basically let this thing that is affecting them to get out. It doesn't happen within 3-4 hours and then, oh yes, I'm just going to leave. I mean, not that it cannot happen, it can happen, but it would really be a very rare thing, a very, very rare thing. And I would say it again and again, do your own ruqya and don't ask others to do it for you. Don't ask others to do it for you. You do your own. Unless it's okay to ask for someone to do ruqya for you and at least get the training and know how it's done, and you continue doing the project at home. Sometimes the sihr is so strong on the person that they may not be capable of doing it. So I would say, listen, save your money, let somebody from your own family basically learn how it's done and continue to do it. But the most effective one is when you do it on your own. You do it on your own. Some of the things to help you protect it from all of that is one, hygiene. Keep and maintain tahara. Hygiene is extremely important. Maintain tahara as much as you can. Number two is constant dhikr, whether you're listening to the dhikr or you yourself doing dhikr. And number three, constant sujood is extremely important. And number four, staying away from haram. So you look at وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ ثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. Those are the three main things. If you stay away from these things, inshallah, you will be protected. Inshallah, you will be protected, but constant dhikr throughout the day and throughout the night. Okay. Aisha Lee, go ahead, dear.
I had a question about Ruqya. So I've seen videos on YouTube where they have a compilation of like surahs they put together and they recite that and they say that this is Ruqya. And is that valid to listen to? And would that be Ruqya, or do you have to recite with the reciter, for example, to be
Okay,
Ruqya?
fair enough. So those are taken as excerpts. So they'll take, let's say, from Surah Al-Saffat, a group of ayat Surah Al-Saffat, or a group of ayat from Surah Al-Ahqaf, or a group of ayat from Surah Al-Qalam, or a group of ayat, etc. The compilation is not necessarily coming from a valid resource. So there isn't a valid resource. So let me say that again. There is no valid resource to tell me that Surah Al-Saffat basically heals from, let's say, exorcism, or the ayah in Surah Al-Yunus heals from this, but it was more of an experience and more of an experiment thing that many might have done to actually see it, and to see it affecting in bringing treatment. So that was more of certain people in certain, you want to call them scholars, you want to say, most of the times they're not actually scholars, but they just did their own, they had their own take on it, and it worked for some, but Ruqya is not exclusive to those. Now, I know that there are certain YouTube videos, it will tell you ayat al-Ruqya, you can actually use that. Those ayat al-Ruqya, they're just reading those ayat maybe one after another. You can hear it and you can read it yourself, and you can actually have those ayat. Hold on, let me see, I can probably find those for you. Ayat al-Ruqya, and let me see, ayat al-Tahsin, at least ayat al-Ruqya, ayat al-Tahsin, and let's see this one, here's this one. Let's see if these are the ayat right there. Yeah, so here we go. Those are ayat al-Tahsin right there. At least, somebody just combined them, and they're just reading all of them. And, the way that I would do the Ruqya, let's say, it's quite interesting that there's actually more than this. Hold on, let me try to find another one. See right there, giving you all those ayat right there. You can watch these videos, you can listen to them, or you can even recite them yourself. Let's see if I can find ayat al-Ruqya right there. I'm going to use, instead of ayat al-Tahsin, ayat al-Ruqya. But certainly I don't have the letter Ra. Ayat al-Ruqya right there. And here we go. So you can actually get that. And here we go. Okay, here we go. See, that's the full thing. I know that the font, you can use a different kind of a font, and you can have, here's وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ 102 right there, and وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهُ وَاحِدٌ. This is the one that I usually use, but there's another one that is even more expanded, and definitely taking you to other ayat. This is the shorter version, but you can also use these ad'iyah right there. Allahumma rabban nas adhib al-ba's washfi anta shafi la shifa illa shifa'uk and a'udhu bi kalimati Allahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq or min sharri ma ajad wa uhadhir. And you can use all those ayat because they're actually coming from the Quran itself. So here we go. Here's another one. Those versions right there. This one is very strong from what I had basically experienced. Let's see. This is also a shorter version. The strongest one is, from my experience, is Surah As-Saffat. Surah As-Saffat, at least the first, hold on, let me see those. Don't know it. Let me see if I can take you to Surah As-Saffat. That's probably the strongest one by far. Surah As-Saffat is definitely one of those strongest surahs, and you would hear that person, if they're facing exorcism, they would be screaming in loudest screams with Surah As-Saffat when Surah As-Saffat is recited. And it would definitely be something that is extremely strong. Why am I going the other way? Okay, sorry about that. I guess I'm not focused and I'm going the wrong way. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, go. All right. So just to note that one, Surah As-Saffat, and certainly those ayat with Surah As-Saffat, when you're Saffat, Safa, and certainly up until, just can't get it right there, Saffat. Okay. No, don't do that. Okay. Up until pretty much half the page. I just can't see it right there. Can't find it. Okay, up until إذا كنا أوكي أو آباؤنا الأولون قالوا نعم وأنتم داخلون. Let's see. هذا يوم الفصل الذي كنت أحشر الذين ظلموا أزواجهم بما كانوا يعبدون من دون الله فاهدوهم إلى صراط الجحيم وقفوهم إنهم مسؤولون ما لكم لا تناصرون. Let's see. Up until okay, up until here. إلا عباد الله المخلصين أولئك لهم رزق معلوم وفواكه وهم مكرمون. Up until here. Up until إلا عباد الله المخلصين. Very strong and extremely powerful. And certainly when we're speaking about Surah As-Saffat and its powers and all of that and other ayat, you can use other ayat. Ayat al-Kursi is one of those strong ayat as well. And certainly you'll have different experiences depending on the person, but certainly using ruqya is something that, as long as it's not shirky, that's actually permissible. Did I answer that question, dear?
Yes, you did. Jazakallah.
All right, inshallah. All right, let's continue right there. معنى عظيم. He was talking about وجاءوا بسحر عظيم. What is عظيم? Meaning that it was a lot, whether we're speaking about the number of it or whether we're speaking about that it was, in their view, it appeared as something that was strong, something that was well trained, something that appeared that it was, let's call it, real. It appeared real to them. And certainly, let's look over here. Ibn Zayd, who's actually a Maliki scholar, he said that that parade or that presentation that was done, that it was in Alexandria in Egypt, and that, let's say, and he said that the tail of that snake actually reached a far area to close to al-Bihira or al-Buhira, which basically is a city in a city, or actually more of a village or a city in Egypt. But I want you to look at this one. Although they had said that, but just like before, and certainly you could see the stories that it opened up its mouth and it started eating up everything, and and that what they actually used for those rods and those ropes in order to make them appear real, that they basically used mercury and it started moving, all of that. And I want you to look right there, number 6 and number 7. Ibn Atiyah, one of my favorite scholars. We did talk about him last time. And we did say that in his Al-Muharrar al-Wajiz that he does go over and verify the statements on tafsir, and right there, Ibn Atiyah, he also still wanted to not just take whatever is mentioned in the books of tafsir or even any word without verification, and he said the following. He said, وَهَذَا قَوْلٌ بَعِيدٌ مِنَ الصَّوَابِ مُفْرِطُ الْإِغْرَاقِ لَا يَنْبَغِي أَنْ يُلْتَفَتَ إِلَيْهِ. He said, this is actually very far away from reality and certainly exaggerated in its description, and it should not be something that we should at all pay attention to. So now we understand that just because some notes and some stories are mentioned, and certainly right now with AI and animation and all of that, you're going to see a lot more stories basically coming up with that imagination. And certainly then that becomes perhaps the real piece of information that will circulate within the society and not what is actually in the Quran. So just pay attention to that. And let's see number 7. You could see the same stories of that it basically opened up into 40 meters wide or whatever it is, even though it is in the books of tafsir, but just because it's there, that doesn't make it authentic. Why can't we just take this information? Why do we need verification? Why didn't you need verification with this qira'ah, for example? Fair enough. We needed this information to be verified because we needed a chain of narration that really showed me that this information was either coming from wahi or it was coming from a valid resource, meaning that this information, there's no way that this information can be known to us just by just an idea popping on our head. This is either a fact or it is something that was made up. Okay, if it is a fact, then I need to know the source of it. If it is a fact, I need to know the source of it. So if we were to look at, for example, qara'a hafs, etc., the source of it is I have chain of narration that goes all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. That's my chain of narration. That's my verification. All right. But for somebody to say opened up its mouth 40 meters wide or gulped up everything, or they used mercury for this and that, then in that situation, I would need evidence to verify that this information was not made up, because it needs to then go back to the Prophet ﷺ, who is the one that has the wahi, who got and received the revelation and the wahi. Other than that, then that would mean it was just their own imagination, or it was coming from Israeliyat, the legends probably of Bani Israel, the Christians, the Jews, that said these stories. But just because they had said these stories, that doesn't make it verified, because they had said very many stories. If their information was verified, I would have believed that we didn't need another scripture. But the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Quran as the final scripture was because their scripture was not whatsoever kept as verified, was not whatsoever kept as the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent the revelation. So in other words, their revelation cannot be trusted. But in situations where perhaps we know that that piece is not contradicting Islam, that's when we would know, well, I mean, yes, I have something to verify it, which is the Quran to verify it. Other than that, then I don't have to consider and believe in all of these legends that were mentioned. Let's see right there. The other part is that their knowledge about Egyptology was definitely not there. In fact, the pyramids were not torn down. Nothing was basically done to the pyramids, even though they existed during the time of Amr ibn al-As. And Amr ibn al-As himself is a Sahabi, and for sure they had seen the pyramids, but no one gave them any attention. And certainly the Muslims did not tear them down. They had existed all these years, even during the time of Sahaba. And when you say Amr ibn al-As, it was Umar ibn Khattab that sent him. And for sure, he knew that these things existed, because these things are basically not just known to us, but they were, you know, something that is actually right close to the Nile River. So in other words, you know, it's a city, we're talking about the most densely populated area, which is in the Middle East, it's basically Egypt. So certainly, you know, whether you're talking about Bedouins walking past it, or in other words, the information was for sure going to be there, because the pyramids are not something that you can easily whatsoever just not spot. They're spotted, they knew that they existed, but certainly they did not tear them down. And the reason for that was because they were not regarded as something that is that was holy at all. So it was something that was dismissed, and that is basically the way that even when we're speaking about Mada'in Salih, it was just dismissed, even though it was there. They had seen it, they already knew. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ passed by it, so for sure they had already seen it before. In fact, it was a water resource for many of those Bedouins that would pass by it. Now, but Egyptology and learning about archaeology and learning about their lifestyle, that is the ancient Egyptians and what they lived like and what was used and all of that, this isn't something that not the scholars of Tafseer, and certainly not the scholars at the time, to basically have that information as verified, to bring it to us, for us to know whether this really is valid or not, and where they would get this information from. All right, let's see. And he said, Hafs said, تلقف بإسكان اللام. But one thing, you can see that there are different قراءات. So تلقف, تلقف and تتلقف. And I thought it would be really fun to actually go back to our favorite website right there. We're going to go to the different qira'at just for, I guess, for the fun of it, and also see those meanings. So we're looking at a 117. It's going to open up right there, and let's see it. And in the different qira'at, let's see. وأوحينا إلى موسى أن ألق عصاك فإذا هي تلقف. The word is تلقف ما يأفكون. And in another قراءة قالون عن نافع تلقفوا ما يأفكون. And certainly you can hear it, you can just click on it and it will actually read it for you. So reading it as تلقفوا right there. Let's see, ورش عن نافع, a completely different sounding of it. Let's say it's this one.
فإذا هي تلقف ما يأفكون.
Taking away all the hamza, we know that about warsh, and certainly you can get the same thing with a different tariqa right there, and talaqafu right there, and let's see this one, same thing, you can see talaqafu and talqaf. So the question is there any difference in the meaning? So the difference in the meaning is that whenever you were to have a shadda, the shadda is going to either give me that there is one, a repetitive behavior, or two, it can also give me an exaggerated, something like a hyperbole, or it can give me an emphasis on something. So in this situation, what do we understand of that? Let's see what they said. So in the first meaning, talqaf, what is talqaf? What does the mean? What does the word actually mean? So we had inspired Musa, so there was the wahi to give him instructions to throw out his cane. And it right away, when you look at right away, so we're speaking about an instant with a letter fa right there. فَإِذَا هِيَ تَلْقَفُ مَا يَأْفِكُونَ. Talqaf actually means to catch, and talqaf can mean to gulp up. And the word يَأْفِكُونَ, al-ifk is basically a blatant lie. It's a blatant lie. So when you say a blatant lie, you're speaking about that it was a form of blasphemy. It was a major delusion. So in other words, that snake, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders him to throw or basically inspires him to throw that rod, staff, or cane, and then it right away gulped up everything. So what if you were to use the word, or what if you to recite it as talaqqafu, not talqafu, but talaqqafu? And if you were to read it talaqqafu, you're talking about one after another, one after another. It wasn't just one in one gulp, but it was basically that snake gulping up one after another, and not the whole thing entirely together. Whether it was doing it in one, or whether it was doing it in all in one gulp, at the end of the day, we know that it was something that they had witnessed, that it was a very powerful snake that was not there, that all of a sudden is moving out and about and is basically gulping up all that they had done. So whether you read it as tatalaqqaf or talaqqaf, and certainly did we actually see that tatalaqqaf or talqaf? So they're all doing talqaf. I didn't see tatalaqqaf, did we? Did we actually see tatalaqqaf? And what's the difference between talaqqaf and tatalaqqaf? Tatalaqqaf would tell me that there is a repetitive behavior, and also that it was kind of like a swift repetitive behavior. Okay. And let's say they're all saying talaqqaf. I don't say tatalaqqaf. And we're going to see down the road as well that al-Qurtubi did actually mention other qira'at, and right there 11. And he was saying الكشف عن وجوه القراءات السبع. So basically telling us that there is a qira'ah, but it seemed like it was probably one of the qira'at that is not basically the one to have the chain of narration as the strong chain of narration, which is called mutawatir. Let me explain the word mutawatir here. Mutawatir means that we had a group of Sahaba basically listening and hearing the Prophet ﷺ recite this verse in that way. And then this group of Sahaba passed it on to a group of Tabi'een, and the group of Tabi'een basically passed it on to a group. So we're talking about group after group after group as the chain of transmission. Okay. But if we're talking about qira'ah shadha, or a variant recitation, but it is, the word shadha can mean an aberration, and the word shadha can mean rare, and can mean that it is not falling within the group paradigm that we just talked about right now, and that it doesn't have this chain of transmission as the same chain of transmission that is group after group after group. Okay, so you can have that, and you were going to see all along al-Qurtubi mentioning a lot of these qira'at, just like this one, talaqqam. And you can see Abu Hatim right there, that there's some qira'at that it's not talaqqaf or فَإِذَا هِيَ تَلْقَفُ مَا يَأْفِكُونَ, but it is تَلَقَّمُ مَا يَأْفِكُونَ. And certainly right there you could say talaqqam, that it is not, and right there at the right there, the Karah al-Musannif, he said, and I guess they have it right there, but I did look it up, and the other scholars actually said that that was a qira'ah shadha, and not one of the qira'at that are actually considered as mutawatir, which is group upon group as a chain of transmission. So whether talqaf or tatalaqqaf, it's just to show what actually happened. Ma ya'fikun certainly was a lie. Certainly they had used ropes. We know that one. Did they stuff mercury inside these ropes, basically because mercury has basically the way that it expands due to heat, of course, is different. And did they probably use certain things to make that mercury expand and use that? It would be really interesting to know, did they actually have those resources to bring about that much mercury? It would be really interesting. That would take a lot of mercury to actually bring in order to make that available. But after all, he's the king. If he can have that much gold, why can't he have mercury done? Is it necessarily mercury? Do we have to believe that? I guess something that an Egyptologist might actually let us know. But here's another question. If Prophet Musa alayhi salam existed, why don't we see in all the, you know, the writings in that basically the writings that the Egyptian writings, the ancient Egyptian writings and all that, okay, I forgot the word, you know what I'm talking about, the hieroglyph, it's not coming out, all right? Why isn't it there? Why wasn't Prophet Musa alayhi salam mentioned in all that ancient Egyptian writing? Number one is that certainly when you look at all that writing that was on the pyramids and all of that, that was to keep track of the things that involved what they considered as holy or what they considered as important. And certainly they did not consider Prophet Musa alayhi salam as important. And certainly they were not going to glorify Prophet Musa alayhi salam by mentioning Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam not being mentioned in all that ancient writings does not mean that he did not exist. Yet there are certain writings that do mention of certain queens and certain kings. And one of the queens, Asiya, all of a sudden, you know, you would see that that Egyptian writings they would keep track of every single king, every single queen, and how they died and all of that. But then you would see that the queen that was with one of the pharaohs, which would date around the time of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and her name, Asiya, was actually written something close to Asiya. I forgot the exact word for it. I can get that for you. And that all of a sudden, you know, you could see that the story is incomplete. Her story all of a sudden disappears from all the writings, even though there was an indication, there was a mention of her in the old writings, but then how she died and when she died and anything about her, all of the details disappeared all of a sudden. Okay, but that's not what happened to the other queens. But why this one in particular? Now we have answers to it, which is mentioned in the hadith, that she basically had believed in Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And when she believed in Prophet Musa alayhi salam, the king considered that as a threat to his kingdom and basically basically whether executed her or of course, certainly if you're married to the king basically is the one that can determine your life and your death and all of that, and especially if we're talking about somebody like the pharaoh. And certainly he would basically then give the order of what is to be written. What is to be written on in those hieroglyphics or whatever it is, you know, what is to be written, what is to be documented, what is not to be documented, and what is basically to be as history. And certainly we just see this piece of it. There are other things also about Bani Israel that that they were basically gone and that there was something there, but not necessarily in all the full details. But that is not necessarily to prove that Prophet Musa alayhi salam did not exist, but it was basically to understand how in the ancient times they considered the most important writing. What is the writing that was what are the instances, what are the events, what is the information that is to be documented is what they were documenting. And certainly that was based on their perspective. Same thing if you were to look at let's just assume let's just assume we found information, let's say that dated back, or a certain site that dated back to Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, or Prophet Lut alayhi salam. Well, they saw these people as aberrators. They didn't see them as worthy of writing about them. So certainly you don't expect to find writings about them because they didn't see them as part of their civilization in the beginning. So they wanted to boast about their civilization, regardless of any group of people. They always would want to endorse themselves and certainly speak about their civilization as something that is extraordinary. So they were going to document all the things that they basically had seen would make them appear as extraordinary. And certainly they weren't going to document those people that they had seen were nothing but a threat to their society. So if you look at Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, he only had 11 followers, or 12 or 13, basically a small number. Certainly to the majority, that wasn't something that was going to be worthy of mention. There is a book, let me show it to you right there. Let me bring it up right there, and let's say Tarikh, oh man, with that in شبهات تاريخية حول القرآن. This is, oh come on, شبهات تاريخية. Okay, let me see if I can get that. Okay, it doesn't want to. I'm going to get it out, inshallah. Let's go like that. Okay, here we go. This book right there. Oh, I didn't know that it was actually available for real. They put the whole book here. Okay. All right. No, there's actually a better version than this. Hold on. Let me see if I can get that for you. Let me see if I can get that for you. There's a better version. This is the older version. This one. This book right there. This is probably one of these books that are really important to even translate. It is in almost, give or take, like 500 pages. And what the book discusses is just this misconception. If the prophets did exist, why do we not find any archaeological artifacts that basically speak of their existence? So it goes into studying archaeology, the archaeological schools, and basically the manuscripts and some of that information that basically dates back. So whether we're speaking about Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, even though, of course, the Jews don't consider him as a prophet, do we find anything that relates to him? Do we find anything that relates to the way that he had basically worshipped or believed or anything of that sort? Do we have anything? And of course, we're right now seeing people come up and actually say that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't exist. Are we going to believe each and every single presentation that basically would say that, yes, he didn't exist, or that one didn't exist? And certainly we even have others actually say that Prophet Isa alayhi salam didn't even exist, and that all of that was nothing but a legend, and that it's just nothing but a historical legend, just like when we're speaking about, who knows, just different legends in history. And therefore this book basically goes deep in discussing all that information and even the epistemology of it. This is the most important word for it, the epistemology and the methods used in archaeology and what archaeology really presents, and how much can we trust in archaeology, and how do we understand all of that? Because certainly a lot of times people are watching these documentaries and they don't understand that this documentary is actually coming from, they would present it to you as if it's a fact. But what you might not notice is that some stories or narratives or interpretations are really just nothing but in the head of one of these people, which maybe all the archaeologists or all the experts in that field might say, you know what, I'm sorry, but this isn't containing any valid information or any valid resources. And certainly, especially if we're talking about this history of Bani Israel, certainly Israeli archaeologists actually had done a lot of whether it's creating narratives or whether it's, let's call it changing certain facts and certain things. My brother is an archaeologist and actually graduated from the Hebrew University, and he was telling me of all those many times when the professors or his professors, or even while they were digging into certain sites, how the professor, or sometimes they would say, well, we have to say this because it supports the Israeli narrative. It supports this. So certainly, and when you see that, oftentimes people don't recognize what's actually behind a lot of these departments. Just a note, just like, I know it firsthand, whether we're talking about psychology department, sociology department, literature, and women's studies departments and theology department. And I know as person that used to work on campus and used to work basically with the staff and the faculty. And I know that there is some agenda, and every single college has an agenda. Same thing. You're going to have the Hebrew University, which was the first thing that Israel basically built in Al-Quds area. And certainly you're going to have a key reason to why it was founded was basically to bring in a support, to bring in this support that would support the Israeli narrative. So, of course, this book is extremely important to go back to if somebody has any of those questions in that regards. And there is a website. It's like an AI. This book was not translated as far as I know. I don't know for sure, so don't take my word for it. I'll verify tomorrow, inshallah. But there is an AI that you can actually upload the book, let's say the PDF part of it, and then it will translate the book for you. Like I said, it's not 100% accuracy, but 75% accuracy, 85% accuracy is better than nothing. And right now, AI can actually do a really good translation. So for those that are, I guess, interested in this topic, here's the book, and this book is in Arabic. I don't know how you can get it. I would say, hold on, let me see how can you get this book if you're interested in it. I don't really know. Hold on, let me see. I would have to see. Okay. I don't know how to get it, but I know perhaps maybe this website, it's called Rawasikh. I think you can get it through them. I don't have the letter R on my laptop, so sorry about that. But it's Markaz Rawasikh. I think that's how you can get that book. All right, so we definitely exceeded our time. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. Go ahead, my friends. No one wants to say anything. Okay, so what I'm
Assalamu
gonna...
alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum
Sister
salam. Asma, go ahead, dear.
Yes, sister. Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? How's
Walaikum,
the family?
alhamdulillah. Allah yarda anik, ya Rabbi.
Jazakallah khair. Mama, well, I wanna talk something. Okay, I wanna ask you something. Like I told you my daughter, she's 13, and the younger one, she's 8 years old, and I want to send them online. In-person school. So I would like to ask you, even though my older daughter, she knows dua, can I still read dua on them before they go to the school?
Oh,
Because
absolutely. Always. In fact, this is the sunnah. Good question. In fact, this is the sunnah that you would do ruqya on your children every day, even if you didn't do ruqya on yourself. Okay. So definitely always do ruqya on them. Always, I'm talking about those extreme cases that might really be serious cases that I would say, hey, do ruqya on yourself. But in just day-to-day life, definitely, just do ruqya on your kids every day before they sleep, all of that, and teach them how to do ruqya on themselves. And this is actually recommended. It's a sunnah to do that.
Jazakallah khairan, sister.